It's funny because I'm like listening to this NotebookLM episode about this audio clip that I made this morning and sent to a friend. Hello there. And it's talking about how I deal with my own stress and anxiety. But I'm feeling stress and anxiety about it because I'm trying to find this point that it made in the episode. There was like a very, very sharp critique of my lifestyle that I was like, that's a really interesting question. Like I had never really considered it from that perspective before. And I want to get the exact wording because, that just makes it so much better than me trying to paraphrase it and losing the essence of it, because I feel like the way that it presented the idea was like, I was like, that is so crazy, like deep, like the connection that it's making there is like, it's got to be a very sharp look at a possible truth. It's something about it. Like it has this feeling of like me not wanting to believe that it would be true or could be true. But then also, if I'm honest with myself and I'm at my least feelings of arrogance and egotism, I can look at the question and I could be like, well, it's you could make a compelling argument both ways, whether a favorable one that kind of like, applauds the decisions that I make and the way that I live my life, and a more derisive one that's more of like, well, this guy is what he is doing something that could technically be diagnosable. I just think that that's a really funny perspective to look at the whole thing in, because I think ultimately it is a fairly meaningless distinction that the question is trying to split. Because it's just like, well, I mean, there's probably also a third possibility and a fourth possibility and a fifth possibility. This is the rational brain kicking up, being like, okay, well, it's not like I just heard the voice of God or something. Just do remember these are statistical probabilities. So it's just saying that there's a relationship between this kind of a thing and that kind of a thing. And that's just, it's an interesting thing that is apparently present within the human consensus of information. Like this specific correlation between these concepts and themes is common enough for it to be made here in my own instance of life. So as soon as the thing pulls up, I'll be able to ask that question and see how I respond to it, because it wasn't like a direct accusation or anything like that of any particular type of belief or even like practice of life, but it was just like, I was like, ooh, that like claws in, kitty. that was a like, when a dog is playing and they bite you a little bit too hard and you're like, hey, we are playing, right? Like this is supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to actually hurt me. So, I don't want to tease it too much more, because I'm sure you're being like what I'm being like. I'm like, well, what's the question? And then I'm like, I'm right there with you. I don't remember, but it was a good one. And it was good enough for me to certainly, attempt to get it in its proper intact form. But yeah, I just got back from a bike ride, made a cup of coffee as soon as I got back. And I just popped in a Zen, and I have some water. Let's get that water. I'm sensitive to my perception of blood osmolarity. Like, I don't think that I actually can tell when this happens, but I kind of feel like I think that I can. Like, when I get, it's not even like severe dehydration, but I just went on like a 24-mile bike ride. It was pretty warm. I did drink a liter of water, so I didn't have no water or anything like that. That wouldn't be smart. But for sure, I didn't drink as much. I think when you rehydrate, you're supposed to drink 125 or maybe even 150% of the volume that you lost in sweat, which makes sense because, like, it's not just sweat that is being created through hot conditions. It's also urine, and it's also the water going through the cells in your body to keep them specifically hydrated. Like water, like you can lose it in way more places than just like perspiration. There's also respiration. I've heard you lose a ton of water through exhaling. And in fact, I've also heard that when you lose weight, like when you burn fat, the majority of it that you burn on any given instance or occasion is through your breath, which is kind of interesting. I'm sure there's some kind of like biological pathway of like fat oxidation, maybe. I'm not even sure. NotebookLM, can you rescue me here before I pull out more words that have nothing to do with what I'm actually trying to talk about? But yeah, dude, it was a good ride. It was a good afternoon. It's been a good 24 hours. I did not make a clip yesterday. And I was struggling on my way home. I was like, what did I even do yesterday? How did I not have time to make a clip? I was like, I remember I went on a 10-mile bike ride. I know I did that. I did some odds and ends around here. Don't even remember what all of those were. And then in the evening, early evening, mid-afternoon, I guess, mowed the grass with my dad, which, shout out to my dad. He's a good coworker. I'll just say that, well, I'm glad he's my dad. So, shout out to him. And what else? Yeah, mowed the grass, and then I was just ready to chill and have a beer and talk. I don't even remember. I feel like there was some topic of discussion last night because we were all out here on the front porch, and we ended up eating dinner out here too, kind of to keep the vibes going. But I can't remember what was so engrossing about. It seemed like there was some shared thing that we were talking about. Not that I'm necessarily trying to dredge that up for sharing, but shout out to Sharon. I don't remember what it was, so just out of my own curiosity. So I guess we'll leave it there. It was a pretty relaxed evening. We actually watched, this was funny, to anyone who happens to be a Zach Galifianakis fan, I would highly recommend revisiting, even if you're not a fan, if you're just familiar with him, I'd recommend revisiting the 2006 Live from the Purple Onion special. We watched that last night, and it was hilarious. Like, I think that, they say comedy doesn't age well, or at least Dan Harmon would say that pretty regularly when he was defending himself about something, over something, from something. But yeah, most of the jokes I think were still really funny. To be fair, like that's kind of like, what do they call that? I guess you could call it patient zero for like my knowledge and active consumption of comedy. Like, not that Zach Galifianakis was like a huge influence on the people who I listened to, but during the time that I was also listening to Zach Galifianakis, which would have been like me being a sophomore in high school, which is crazy to think about. The special was 20 years old. It's insane. It's like literally a classic. And yeah, it was wild. Just to see some of these jokes I still remember. One of the funny ones, I mean, my mom asked me at a certain point if I was a fan of Stephen Wright, which I am. I've like never sat down and studied his oeuvre, but I certainly have seen enough YouTube clips to be like, this guy's clever and funny. I don't know if I could listen to this for like an hour, because like, a bunch of witty one-liners, I kind of consider those to be seasoning in comedy. Like George Carlin might have had a few things through the course of an hour-long special that were like really, really sticky and memorable, like just awesome turns of phrases, or even just maybe not the best even turn of phrase, maybe something really barbarically simple that he just says in such a way that it's just like, oh, dude, like I'm never gonna be able to forget that a human being said that, But yeah, like 2006. That was like when I was establishing my taste in comedy, and it was just fun to watch that. And my dad and I have also, it's funny, I don't really watch a lot of TV outside of being home, but when I am home, it is a not insignificant part of the evening wind down procedure. They say that it's important to have sleep hygiene, like I have, maybe this isn't important for everybody, because there was certainly a period of my life where I could sleep, like it was never an issue. I didn't even know what it was like. It was like literally impossible for me to imagine what insomnia felt like, like it was so impossible that it never even crossed my mind as something that should be like imagined. I never really thought like, what's that like? There's so many stories about people who have insomnia, and I've known people throughout my life who have mentioned it, but it just never really sounded like that big of a deal. But then I got it, and like for like, God, was it like 2 years? Maybe it was a year and a half. I can't remember. I don't know. It was a long time. Like maybe it was, let's say no less than a year. So like long enough, like we're talking about like at least 300 sleep cycles, like dramatically, noticeably disturbed and altered from my typical like relationship with sleep. And I got to tell you, in terms of like torture, insomnia was like one of the worst things I ever experienced. I was glad that it was only insomnia and not anything else that was like, related to it or a side effect of it, or a side effect, that insomnia being a side effect itself. Like I was like, well, I mean, this really sucks. It's a really, really frustrating thing to have a combative relationship with sleep, because until that time that it happens, you don't even know that it can turn against you. And then as soon as it does, it feels like such a betrayal of something that you never even realized was such an easy experience to have. Like when you can't sleep, it's just, I don't know what it is. It's the biochemical cocktail that you have going through your body when you're experiencing insomnia is one of acute distress, And I don't really know why I developed it. It was shortly after a breakup, so that's like the only thing that I can reasonably attribute it to, because I mean, that was the most traumatic breakup maybe I've ever had. And also the fallout from it was probably the most I'd ever felt from one, I suppose. So the biological ingredients were there. I'm probably not very good at grieving. And the traumatic part was like it wasn't like a huge like crying fest with like, and maybe that's why I got insomnia, right? It wasn't like this huge thing. It was just like my girlfriend and I at the time, we had kind of always known that we were going to go separate ways. She was a lot younger than I was. And she wanted to go live like a young person's lifestyle, and I had already skipped that, / participated in it as much as I had ever wanted to. Like I didn't want to go to clubs, and I didn't want to go like dancing, and I didn't want to go to bars. Like I was like, dude, I already dodged that bullet. I don't have any desire whatsoever to pursue that lifestyle. And my girlfriend felt a little bit more differently about just like, not even strictly going to bars or whatever, but just like meeting people the way that you kind of do when you're in your early 20s, like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's like the only time in your life where you can really do that. That's where you're going to like, meet your friends that you'll probably have for the rest of your life, and also possibly your partners and things like that. Like a 20-year-old person, like that's like the prime of your life to be able to basically find commitments, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I've never thought about it through that lens, but that is like when you are most free, and that's usually also the time when people will commit to something like a house, a marriage, their career, all those kinds of things. So, I felt like I was more established in that arena, having already gone through something that I was, what I would consider equivalent. And, so we went our separate ways, and it was sad because, she and I had spent a lot of time together doing what I would consider the most important things I've ever done in my life. Like, we were more than just girlfriend and boyfriend. I hope I could honestly say that most of the time we enjoyed each other's company. I definitely cringe when I made podcasts from all of these adventures that I went on with her. And when I hear myself, I'm like, damn, I sound like a 13-year-old, and I don't even think I can blame it on my company at the time, her being so much younger. She was 20, I was 29 when we met, but I feel like I've I don't know, I guess it's because I've had to spend time alone, I've had some relationships since then, but nothing that was like particularly long, with this other person, Allie. Shout out to Allie. I was with her for, I think, 3 years. So that was like the second longest relationship I've been in, and I have not been in one that long since then. Anyway, I think that's probably what instigated the insomnia. And man, I just got to tell you, as I already said, It is the worst. You really. I've never read the book about insomnia. I think it's just called Insomnia or Insomniac, the Stephen King book. I can't. Maybe it's not even called that, but I think that there was some movie that they turned into turned the novel into the movie. Broken Window, was that what it was? Oh my God, I don't remember. Johnny Depp was in it. I saw the movie, and I feel like a big part of it was like he had insomnia, and then it basically drove him crazy. But yeah, my insomnia, it was, I came to find that there are two types of insomnia. You have onset insomnia, which is like you can't go to sleep. Like you falling asleep even the first time is the hardest part. And then there's maintenance insomnia, which is maintaining a sleep state, which that's what I had. And I don't know which is worse. It's hard to imagine. I'm sure they both suck equally. Although, honestly, onset seems more miserable to me because, I don't know, I could always kind of trick myself a little bit with maintenance insomnia where it'd be like, well, I did get some sleep. You know, like I know that I had 2 bouts of sleep with a bout of wakefulness in the middle, whereas like onset, it's like, well, I don't know how long those onset issues would last until you finally fall asleep, but if I could only fall asleep at like 4 a.m. and then sleep for like 4 hours, I think I would feel a lot more tired than if I got 2 distinct sessions, but who knows? Anyway, yeah, so sleep hygiene, like watching TV here is a big part of like the wind down process. It signals, it's a ritualistic thing here that signals that things are winding down. No one really watches TV at this house before like 5 p.m. and really probably not even like much before 6, honestly. But then, you know, we're talking about like a 5-hour TV span after that, my dude. We're chilling. So it's interesting. And, you know, we've been watching this series, my dad and I. My mom is not so much of a fan, shout out to Sharon. But it's called like The Frontiersmen or The Men Who Made America or something like that. And it's going through like how the West was won, basically, from Daniel Boone, who I really had no knowledge of formally. I barely knew that he was known for a skin, what is it called? Raccoon hat. I don't even know what those things are called. Yeah, he didn't wear that at all in the documentary, so I call BS. But also Lewis and Clark have now made an appearance. It's just really interesting, especially having recently gone out to the West on my bike. And, you know, at the time, I was I found it fascinating that I was sharing a lot of the same routes as, like, people who went on the Oregon Trail, you know? And the most interesting thing about that is that I was always taken by the fact that throughout the decades and even throughout the centuries, as people have surveyed that land going from, you know, the East Coast to the West Coast, they have continued to agree that by and large, the swath that they cut into the land is still the most efficient way to get there. I find that kind of amazing. I can't really explain why, but it's kind of like because you're on this shared path, I guess it's kind of like the Appalachian Trail, but because you're on this shared path, like, you can think about, like, you know, 150 years ago, there were people out here on this same exact road looking at these same exact mountains, but they didn't have gas stations, they didn't have electrified lights, they didn't have salt. That was one thing that was like a big deal for Daniel Boone. At a certain point, they were being they were surrounded and they were stuck in their little township, and the thing that was really bringing down the vibe was a lack of salt. Like, it's ridiculous to even consider today. It's like, dude, like, salt, people like literally throw packets of salt away every single day by the ton. I bet, like, for sure there's got to be 2,000 pounds of salt unused, discarded at fast food restaurants throughout the entirety of the United States, you know? And back then it was like the thing that was keeping their people alive while they waited through this crazy onslaught of 12 days being hostage inside of their own township, you know? My, how things have changed. And people think that AI is not going to do that too? Dude, come on. Like, salt was life or death back then. Today, we have things that will be relatively inconsequential in a number of decades henceforth, my dude. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, soon enough, you're gonna you're never going to get sick to begin with, but even if you did through some catastrophic error or negligence, like the ability to undo those things is just going to be so at hand, It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, so what? There was a bear that came through this house, or through this property last night. My parents, they have like a bird feeder that I got from my mom for Christmas, and we have seen evidence that suggested that a bear was close by, because it had been several times dislodged from the pole that it stands on, and one time it had been very seriously taken apart, like every single removable part of the bird house, which has like a camera and stuff in it. It had all been separated from every other piece. So we turned one of my parents' cameras around to face the bird feeder, and this morning we saw that a bear actually did come through at like 4:30 a.m., which is crazy because it was a really big bear, like 300 or 400 pounds for sure, and presumably it could have walked right by my car, which doesn't bother me. I was thinking about that because of this thing that NotebookLM kind of brought up. There was some point, I don't think this is exactly what they were saying, but there was a point where it was like, they said that I was trading the abstract risk analysis of traditional stressors like mortgages and careers, etc., in lieu of, or instead of, or as compared to, like I would rather have a bear. I would rather have to deal with a bear, and this is true. I would rather have to deal with a scenario where like a bear walks close to my car and I have to figure out like if I'm in danger and what I'm going to do about it if I am. I would rather deal with that every single day for the rest of my life than have to willingly at this point, I guess, sign up for the other social duties that are more standard for people my age to hold. I'm not saying that would stay that way forever. I can definitely see situations where that could change and I could elect to go into standard social expectational directions or something. But as of right now, like I'm just like, dude, I'm not ready to do that yet. Like I just think I would get bored. So a bear came through. And then I got up and we did some stuff. I can't remember what. I know digital needfuls were done. There was some stuff going on this morning with my parents. I guess my mom is interested in a Garmin watch, and I had one, so I set it up for her. But yeah, other than that, we went out to lunch with, shout out to John Soleil, the food man himself, the food man cometh, which was fun. We got to hang out at this pizza place for what felt like 2 hours. I don't know if I guess it probably was almost like an hour and a half or so. They had a really nice outdoor seating area. The vibes were good. Everyone was enjoying the banter. And it was good just to spend some time with our boy John. And yeah, then I biked back from that area, and I got here like 30 minutes ago or so. It's 4:15. I'm thinking about having a beer. It's funny because I was thinking, I could make this whole episode and like then it would almost be time for a beer. But as I'm in the process of making it, I'm just like, well, I could just have a beer now. You know what I'm saying? Like, did you consider that? I usually do think that the podcast gets better when I have a drink. Man, I'm like 9/10 of the way to convincing myself, but I'll wait off just for a second. Hold off anyway. To finish the day to this point anyway, which maybe I guess I already did. I had a bike ride. I had some thoughts while being on the bike ride, and I wrote them down as much as I could. And yeah, I think it might be time for a beer, and then we can get into the list items, which is usually a pretty good way of cutting things up. Although 4:15, I mean, that seems early. But no, I mean, that's just, I'm still on this weird schedule post-Appalachian Trail where, I guess on any given day on trail, anything after 5 was like an acceptable day. Like it didn't really matter because like I trust myself enough in the scenario that I'm not going to like slack off or basically waste my own time. Like, I don't know. I envision that there are other types of people, because surely there are, that when given unstructured time could possibly utilize it in a way that did absolutely nothing for their greater goal. And that's totally fine. Like, I don't really have any judgments against whatever anyone wants to do with anything, just because I hope that that courtesy is also returned to me in kind. But, you know, I trust myself enough to know that if I'm on a mission, like the Appalachian Trail or the bike ride or whatever, I'm going to get the miles in that I can for the day. I don't even want to say that I need to, because it's not, if it turns into a needful situation, then that's where the possibility of burnout comes in, which is dangerous for passions, because, you know, once your passion is burnt out, it takes a while to reignite that flame. Like, I've definitely done that before with biking. In fact, it's what led me to do the Appalachian Trail the first time. I was so exhausted by even the idea of my bike that I literally needed to walk away from it for 4 months and just completely reset. I didn't use Strava. I didn't do any of the stuff that I had become so obsessed with. And it worked. And then I got to return. But it took 4 months. I don't know at what point in that 4-month period I was actually cured from the burnout. But I know for sure the first thing I did when I got off the Appalachian Trail, just a couple weeks after settling back in Atlanta, was to bike the Blue Ridge Parkway. And that was like one of my favorite bike rides I've ever done. I would like to do it again. Shoot. Yeah, I just remembered it. Since I'm going to trail days, I can probably jump on the Blue Ridge Parkway at some point on my way to Virginia. I'm sure I can. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I was on it just ever so recently back in Charlottesville area. But anyway, yeah, I think it's time for a beer. I've waited 2 minutes. I've proven to myself that I can wait. And now it's time to reward myself by giving myself exactly what I wanted anyway, regardless of if I had waited or not. I'm trying to refresh this NotebookLM thing so I can try to find that question. But man, the internet out here is like really struggling. Come on. Let's go inside real quick. I'm out on the back porch, so I have the house to myself. Is this working or is it not working? Okay, come on. Does not seem like it's working. Can we switch to a different internet and maybe turn off my hotspot here on my phone, since I didn't really do anything to begin with? Let's see. We got that. Got the good internet going. I don't know why this is... Maybe I need to do the whole thing again. I probably do. Let's try that. Create new. And then I guess I'll try to remember to come in here in a minute, and then we can see if it worked to actually remove... It's an audio clip, and so it has to be converted to a text file. It takes a little bit. I'm not sure if it does it locally or if it does it in the cloud or whatever, but it takes a long time. So I've got a beer, and it's working. I'll put my cup over here in the sink. I'll grab this beer to go outside. Actually, I'll refresh my Zen. Nice. Looks like it could almost rain a little bit, which would be crazy. Everyone around here would be saying how much they need rain. But this could just be a tricky cloud that makes it look like it's overcast, but it's really not. I think that was the case. So, anyway, 4:20. Wow. Well, here we go. Ooh, a little bit of suds going on. Okay. So, let's see. Okay. So I want to caveat this by saying that I'm not trying to make any... I feel like AI, every time it gets all wimpy and it decides that a topic they don't want to insult anyone. And so they'll go off for like 3.5 minutes about how they're just reporting what the narrator has said. They have no stakes in the actual content of the message. And they're just strictly reporting things. But suffice it to say, I heard some jokes today about how certain cars are often related to a certain type of person with a certain type of preference, shall we say, right? And I was thinking about that because I actually have thought that human sexuality is, at least in men, or perhaps in people who have the same kind of physiological structure as men, because I think it's probably a pretty wide spectrum. But for men, I think that like sexuality is like a primarily, or maybe not primarily, but just certainly more so visual process. I think it goes straight. The visual cortex is like directly connected to the libido, and for women it's not so much that way. And I'm not trying to say, again, this is just broad strokes for like a thought that I had, not trying to say anything particular socially about anything at all. This is strictly mechanical. This is me saying like, I wonder how this actually works, and then my brain says, here's a possible solution to the question, and it's like, okay, maybe. Like, so I have thought that sexuality is a primarily visual phenomenon for certain types of nervous systems and biophysiology, depending on gender, I guess. And it reminded me of this video about how reality is like not what you think it is. It was some guy who did a TED Talk, and he was showing how like there were these certain beetles or certain bees or something like that, and they were trying to mate with this certain bottle. It just so happened that the shape, the size, and the color of this man-made bottle was like sufficiently similar to the type of bug that this bug actually wanted to reproduce with, that they would attempt to court the bottle. And I got to think that if there is any kind of visual component to attraction in general when it comes to something as important as reproduction, because again, in general, I think everything is about reproduction and resources, then because we are homo abstracticus, as I now like to say, like we have abstractified the concept of reproduction to even have some elements of attraction in inanimate objects, Like, I think that there is something to the shape of a certain car when a certain type of person sees it that makes it more attractive to them. And this appears to be, like, repeatable. Like, it's not... This, you could say the same thing for any shape of anything that humans like it, and so they gravitate towards it, Like the cans that we drink beer and Coke and stuff out of. It's like... There's a standard size, because like that's the most, for the form factor, it's like we're attracted to this. Like it doesn't feel ridiculous, or you don't question it, If they initially tried to make cans of beer and thought that maybe they should try making like it a gallon size can for personal consumption, I think something about that, the feedback loop, they would not like it. So, we have engineered ourselves to the perfect shape and size and stuff like that for every object. But since people primarily, I think, I don't know if this is true. Aesthetics definitely play a role in car purchasing, right? It does matter how the car looks. Like, that's a part of it for sure. What? Like... Yeah, I don't know. I just think that, I think that there's something in the shape of certain cars that activate our libido. Just in the same way that, I've heard this study that, what was it? Like little monkeys or something like that. They were doing some kind of experiment with little monkeys to see what kind of linguistic expressions were trained versus present when they were born, So they had like this group of monkeys. I don't know exactly how they did this, but it doesn't sound particularly ethical when it comes to, well, I don't even know what the actual design of the experiment was. But what they did, like they assumed, like they took these monkeys, I guess had just been born. They never had any exposure to other monkeys. And then they created a shadow that made the appearance of like a bird of prey. But it was just like, it was a template of that shape. And then these baby monkeys did the exact same call that their older relatives would do for this specific shape. Like, they have like a very basic language, like their screams and their cries denote very specific things. And in this case, if I'm remembering this experiment correctly at all, they basically found that feature of this type of monkey was something that they were born with, which is pretty crazy. Like, there's some part of their hardware that actually has been inscribed in such a way as to have this specific response to this specific stimulus, just without any previous exposure, a priori, which is actually a note of mine, so maybe I should get into that. I don't know if I mentioned whatever I was supposed to be talking about in this note, but let's just assume I did. Oh, yeah, about the cars. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, a priori Western medicine. A priori concepts in Western medicine often refer to theoretical frameworks or medical principles established through reasoning rather than empirical observations alone. This can include fundamental assumptions on pathophysiology and the philosophical underpinnings of bioethics. Yeah, I've been having a conversation with a friend, and she was telling me that, she'd recently got some tests done and stuff like that. And I was just thinking about it because I keep thinking, not for any other reason than just wanting an additional point of data, since two points determine a line, right? And I was thinking that, the thing about Western medicine, at least in this specific line of thinking that I was indulging, it was like, well, the thing about it is, like, they don't have any a priori knowledge of anything about this person beyond what medical records can say. And, it's just like you're presented with this entirely whole problem, and you're presented it, like, when it's at its most unavoidable. Like, you're seeing a patient that came in there for a reason, so something has made an appearance that you have to diagnose. And so it's just like, I feel like the Eastern, my understanding, which is very limited, of Eastern traditional Chinese medicine, is that there's like an emotional component to a lot of the diagnoses that they make. And there's a good portion of things that are, like, identical to Western medicine in terms of, like, again, biological pathways and, like, how certain organs affect the system of the body in their own individual and combined ways. Like, it's not completely divorced from a lot of the same findings that Western medicine has. But Western medicine doesn't look at all into any kind of, like, emotional component to illness or injury. It's, like, completely separate from it. And I think that is a bit of a shame, because, like, not even to go into, like, a woo-woo area or anything like that, but when you are in ill health, that will create a certain type of emotional experience, and those two are it's ignoring a huge data point, where, like, obviously illness is going to cause a certain level and degree of distress, and if that degree of distress is not, like, acknowledged and recognized, it can basically fester just as much as any other actual, like, bodily injury or illness can. And if you lose the leash on both of those at the same time, where your health and your emotions just go downhill, that's going to be a very, very difficult struggle, And I just feel like with Eastern Chinese or traditional Chinese medicine, like they go into the specifics of like, the concept of like qi and like things being stopped up in places for specific reasons. Like, I'd have to look at it, like what the premises of like fundamental traditional Chinese medicine are. I'm sure there's like way more than I could like learn in a single sitting. But in general, if I could like learn the F equals MA of the whole thing, I'm sure it would make a pretty good amount of intuitive sense. I'm just gonna make something up, but like if you get stomach ulcers, they'll talk about how like you spend too much time bottling up anger or something like that, or there's like a more specific, like issues of the stomach have a particular behavior associated with them, and that can be further like explored and I guess prognosed. you could give exercises, but like, it's just the separation between the mind and the body in the West is something that is fairly regrettable. Like I think that by and large, like we in the West for sure treat our mind and our body the same. But the body is dealing with absolute reality and the mind is dealing with abstract reality. And those two things are not the same. And so like when your body is sick, it's communicating a different kind of thing to your emotional state. And if you don't, I don't think Western medicine has much to prop up the intellectual and emotional side of that experience, It could. There's no reason that you shouldn't, just like you get physical therapy after an operation, you should get emotional therapy in conjunction with a major diagnosis, like there is a way to fortify your mind just as much as your body. And it's also, by and large and first and foremost, like it's important for you to not feel like you're alone, because there's nothing, the likelihood after 100,000 generations of modern Homo sapiens, the likelihood of you having a unique human experience that no one else has ever had is practically zero. And in fact, there might be so many people who have experienced what you've experienced that it's almost laughable to think that you're special, no matter what it is. There's only so many things you can do. One thing I find very interesting that I heard Elon Musk say somewhat recently was that if the economy grows 1,000 times from where it currently is, every single human desire and every single human's desire would be satisfied. Because like how many more things can you have? Like if everything is 1,000 times more specific in the economy in terms of like finding a market and an addressable market, and also creating some sort of niche product for it so that it has like some kind of commodity representation of doing it, then like it's hard to imagine. Like we would basically, everything would be optimized, everything would be commodified. So, who cares what the actual consequences of that are? That's not the point of the thought exercise, but it's just interesting to think that, I forgot what I was saying. So 43 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. This is interesting. So, this is something that actually went through my head twice today, just this general concept. And I was just thinking about it because I was thinking about my appetite, I think, at the time. Because I was like, I think I'm still kind of coasting on hiker hunger because, man, I mean, it didn't get that bad or that intense, I should say, because I was only out there for 45 days. But, I remember just how strong that feeling becomes of just this voracious, insatiable appetite when you're doing something like a long bike ride or a long hike. It's kind of funny because, or maybe not funny, but it's interesting that my bike ride was twice as long as my hike. And so I definitely entered that zone of just being so hungry all the time and being able to eat anything at all that I wanted. And, I tried to be responsible with that with great power, But yeah, like just the fact that I think that my general output might be, I don't know if this is true at all, but the number that was coming to mind was 500%. So I was wondering, I was like, if my general output is 500% above what all of society talks about in terms of like averages, then that means even if I decreased my workload by 200%, which would to me feel like taking a break, or at least I don't even know what it would feel like. But maybe this is too self-congratulatory. Maybe I should say 200%. Let's say my general output in terms of like joules of energy, so actual physical things that I'm doing in the environment, let's say it's 200%, whatever is expected for the average American in this epoch. So again, even if I cut it by 50%, I would still be outperforming everyone with physical output on average by a 50% margin. That's like crazy. And so yeah, I was just thinking about that because I feel like, again, in my advanced age and frail state, I feel like when I was younger, I found a lot of value in pursuing things that were extremely difficult. And I'm glad that I did that because I do know that it's technically possible. But as I said to myself somewhat recently when I was thinking about stopping the Appalachian Trail, it was like the primary reason that I thought I needed to stop was because I realized that I could keep going, And I think that that's really significant to sort of reflect on, because like what I'm basically saying is like, I could absolutely, because I've done it before and I don't feel any less strong than I ever have, I know that I could walk and continue to walk all the way to Maine and probably do something even beyond that. Like, who knows, if I was feeling wistful and nostalgic, maybe I'd go up to Canada again, I only had one appointment on that trail, which was with the final mountain, Katahdin. Everything else was fair game, fair dinkum. But yeah, like, because I knew that I could physically do it, I didn't want to emotionally put myself in that situation again, because in 2022, again, I've mentioned this before, but it was a thought I had today, so it's a fresh thought on an old topic, but, it's just, it's such a unfortunate use of time to put myself in such a sour mood, like, because it sucks to be stuck in the sun, it's like, there's nothing fun about it. It's really hot. It's completely inescapable, and it develops into an adversarial relationship. Like, prior to hiking at some point, in my recent past, like I didn't really have any kind of feeling about the sun per se, but now I try to avoid it like all the time. Like, can't really do that when I'm biking or hiking, but, I try to hide as well as I can. So yeah, I don't even know, yeah. Let me see if that thing has loaded. I don't think so. Sorry, Dad. I'm good, thanks. Let me see if I have any other things. My notes, you know what I'm saying? Let's see, this is why I can't be a YouTuber. All this good stuff that I'm doing right now, this would be completely lost in the video because I'd have to cut it out. But yeah, let me see if my thing is done. I might need to pause this if it is, because I don't even know where to locate this from. All right, I'm gonna pause this real quick. Okay, I found it. I want to read it with a little bit of context. Let's see where. Let's see. I know he admits, right, totally. Let's see. Okay. So this is actually like two people talking, so I'll do my best to make it make sense. But This is based on my own clip from yesterday or something. Anyway, well, he is intensely aware of the inputs going into his system. Whether that system is his physical car parked in the headlands or his central nervous system processing an alkaloid from coffee, he is monitoring everything. He really is. He is essentially constructing firewalls. It's a striking duality when you think about it. You have a man who subjects himself to what society considers extreme living situations, sleeping in a car, roaming the wilderness, living off a bicycle. Yet he craves deep internal emotional stability. He wants to control the variables down to the actual gram of coffee. It's like he's microdosing risk. But this is where I start questioning his motivations a little bit. Like, is this a guy running away from the comforts of normal life because he's just this wild, free spirit, or is he actually hyper-engineering his life to avoid the mental discomforts that normal life brings? Because a traditional life with a fixed-rate mortgage and like a corporate performance review brings a type of ambiguous dread that simply cannot be tolerated. It honestly seems like he'd rather risk a 400-pound bear in the yard than sit through a quarterly earnings meeting. The tension between chosen physical hardship and chosen societal hardship is central to his relationship with traditional structures. We see this most clearly in his unorthodox view of the future of financial security. Let's see. I guess that was it. It was, it's that question there. Is he a wild free spirit, or is he actually hyper-engineering his life to avoid the mental discomforts that normal life brings? And I was like, ooh, dang. Like, I don't think that I have actively done that necessarily. I think it's been a piecemeal thing, it so happens at this point. You could certainly look backwards and assess all of the things I've done through that lens, but in the process of actually getting to this point, it felt nothing like that whatsoever. It was just like, I don't know, I'm seeing this weird image in my head, like, if there was like a river that was adjacent to another river, and like everyone in your village said that you should never go to that other river that was like not the main one that we all went to as a village, because bad things happen there, the water is poisoned and people will like attack you. And then you go there and it's like, oh, this is actually just like another river and there's not really anything bad happening here. It's just that's a product of like unfamiliarity and projecting fear onto other people to like kind of manipulate their behavior and also validate the reasons why you're saying something. Like if you put fear in them, like that's it's hard to dispute fear. If you can honestly ignite someone else's fear, you kind of have them in your pocket. So I guess as I think about it, it's like, yeah, because of the decisions that I've made in the past 8 years or so, I am certainly much more reluctant to spend my time doing things that larger society would say are sort of expectations, maybe. I honestly don't think that larger society would say that. I think all of that goes on in our own head. Whatever voice, quote-unquote, society has over your decision-making, that is 100% based on your own perception of society and its role in, like, your internal conversation, Because I've never seen anyone actually enforce any of these rules. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's, like, no one standing outside of, like, a restaurant making sure that people, like, don't do things that they're not supposed to. Doesn't really matter. Steven Pinker has a book out right now. Steven Pinker's one of my favorites. Highly recommend if you want your world shook, my dude. Go watch his TED Talk entitled, "Is the World Getting Better or Worse?" And then perhaps you'll start picking up what I'm putting down. But he has a book out right now called, like, "I Know That You Know That I Know," or something like that. And it's all about, like, basically the unspoken social contract that people all like share without ever having to write it down or have a conversation about it. And that's the only reality that society actually inhabits, in my understanding. It's just like it's your perception of what other people might think of you that is more indicative of your behavior, as opposed to like society is like not a real thing. It doesn't exist as like an actual entity. It's a collection of abstractions, you know. What would you call that? Like the ultimate Homo abstractici. I'm not sure, but like all of that stuff is it's only as real as you think it is. You know, fear, we have nothing to fear, but fear itself is the reason that's such an impactful thing to realize is that like fear, it's it's not a real thing. You know, at best, it's like a biological response that has a very specific chemical fingerprint. But in terms of like inhabiting physical space as a thing that pushes up against any part of reality outside of our heads, like that doesn't exist. So things are only as scary as you let them be. Speaking of bees, there are some crazy bees going on over here, some carpenter bees, and I can hear them like clopping away, like making a hole or whatever they do, which is pretty crazy. Like I don't think that those bees actually sting, but I'd imagine if they're able to bore holes into wood, that if they bite you with their mandibles, it probably hurts pretty bad, like a really, really bad pinch, you know. The sharpest and most, I don't know, exacting pincers, so much farther beyond what human beings can do when they pinch each other, you know. Anyway, this is far too long, and yeah, I'm gonna go have another beer. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Shout out to my parents. Love you. Bye.